What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Bretto. Today, we're here to discuss my instant takeaways, my quick thoughts on the Packers' initial 53-man roster, which was officially set on Tuesday afternoon. But first, hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, and you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So let's dive on in. The Packers' initial 53-man roster is set. Here are my quick thoughts on the breakdown of this roster construction. First up, the Packers opted to go with just four cornerbacks, placing Eric Stokes on the physically unable to perform list. I think it's expected at this point that this is how Stokes' season was going to begin. Now being put on the PUP list in the regular season, he is going to have to miss at least 4 games before he can be activated and return back to the 53-man roster, at which point a cut is going to have to be made. In going with just 4 cornerbacks, obviously that's very light, but the league's recent practice squad elevation rules does make it easier to navigate. On Wednesday, once players clear waivers, the Packers are going to begin constructing their practice squad. And of course, there's going to be, I would guess, multiple cornerbacks on that unit. With the new practice squad rules, the Packers can elevate one player up to, and this goes for all 16 players, but each player can be elevated up to 3 times within a season before the team has to decide, all right, we either need to add him to the 53-man roster or we need to release him, at which point he's a free agent and can sign with whichever team he wants. So I'm guessing that's the approach that we're going to see early on with the Packers taking in terms of just to bring up some additional depth on game day in case an injury happens or anything along those lines. But those new practice squad rules, Brian Gutekunst has talked about it for. It really is, yes, it's a 53-man, but with the practice squad, it's almost like a 69-man roster with how all those players are being managing and how it all works together. A few Packers from the cornerback position who they released that I imagine they'd be looking to bring back: Corey Ballantyne, William Hooper, Innis Gaines, and Keandre Thomas. I don't think they're going to bring back all 4 of those players, but those are, I think, at least 2 of them will be back with the Packers. And of course, they could make an outside addition as well. One of the more intriguing moves that they made, or roster maneuvering type of moves that they made, was releasing long snapper Matt Orchek with the intention of re-signing him on Wednesday. The reason that the Packers did this was so that they could keep Luke Tenuta, offensive tackle, on the 53-man roster before moving him to IR. As we all remember, Luke Tenuta suffered an ankle injury in the Bengals game. He's been sidelined since. Before that, he was having a nice training camp practice, but was clearly behind Caleb Jones and Rasheed Walker in terms of that offensive tackle depth. But clearly, he's someone the Packers also like quite a bit as well. They claimed him off waivers last season early on and rostered him for the entire year. So again, someone that they very much like, especially looking ahead to 2024 when there's so much uncertainty around the offensive tackle position for the Packers. Again, Nyman's a free agent. We don't know what Bakhtiari's future holds. So him, Walker, Jones, all look like guys who this time a year from now, or 11 months from now, I should say, could be competing for playing time on that starting unit. So why they had to do the move this way procedurally is because if Luke Tenuta had been placed on injured reserve before the 53-man roster was set, his season would be over. If you go on IR during this time of the season, but again, before the roster is set, you cannot return. However, by putting him on the 53-man roster, even if it's for a day, and then moving him to IR, he is eligible to return at some point this season. So that was the reason behind the move. So technically, there is not a long snapper on the Packers' initial 53, but they will sign back Matt Orchek on Wednesday is the reported plan, according to Bill Huber of Sports Illustrated. But the biggest surprise for me, I would say, was that the Packers went with Emmanuel Wilson over Patrick Taylor. If you listen to my videos, read any of my work, I've been pretty adamant that Patrick Taylor is going to be the third running back. It very much felt like Matt LaFleur, Brian Gutekunst were giving us the answers to the test, and all those answers pointed at Patrick Taylor. They both said special teams contributions is a must, and Patrick Taylor, I believe, had the second most starting snaps on special teams out of any player on this roster. He also had more receptions and more targets in the preseason than what Emmanuel Wilson did. And again, it's there has to be as Matt LaFleur said, of course, there has to be a core competency as a ball carrier, but it's special teams, it's blocking, it's pass catching that he said were going to be the determining factors in who that third running back is. And then in terms of pass blocking experience, Taylor has much more than Wilson. So again, for all those reasons, I thought that he was going to be running back 3, but instead the Packers go with Emmanuel Wilson, who from a ball carrier standpoint was, of course, far more impressive. He was one of the most productive running backs in the entire NFL this preseason. Had the most rushing yards, tied for first with most rushes of over 10 yards, forced 11 missed tackles as a ball carrier. Just a really impressive ball carrier, natural, good vision. And the Packers obviously saw at least enough in terms of his special teams ability, in terms of his pass blocking ability, that they thought that there was something to work with there, and again are taking a swing on his upside as a ball carrier. Another reason that I thought the Packers were going to go with Taylor is that Matt LaFleur is also pretty straightforward in saying that pass blocking and special teams player areas where Wilson has to get more consistent, and I'm sure that he did over the course of training camp. LaFleur also mentioned on a couple occasions that they wanted to see his conditioning get in a better spot as well. So for all the reasons just mentioned, outside of Wilson's ability as a ball carrier, it really felt like Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst were telling us the answers to the test. But when we thought they were going to zig, they ended up zagging and keeping Emmanuel Wilson on the roster. And just what a terrific story. Undrafted rookie from a Division II school, and without injuries, if injuries to Tyler Goodson and Lou Nichols don't happen, he might not have even had this opportunity to showcase what he has the ability to do. So just a tremendous story, and that's one of the very cool moments that comes from this time of the football season. Those guys who come into training camp very much under the radar, but take advantage of the opportunities and are able to make a name for themselves. So very, very cool story, and just ending here, at least going into the regular season for Emmanuel Wilson. As far as Pat O'Donnell goes, I went into greater detail in an article, mentioned it on yesterday's show as well, but the youth movement for the Packers continues. Pat O'Donnell, he provided stability as a punter when signed last season. There weren't any egregious errors by any means on his part, which to a degree was already a win for the Packers. But in terms of those, typical punter stats that you look at, punts inside the 20, average hang time, yards per attempt on punts, O'Donnell was in the middle or even at the bottom of the league in a number of those key categories. So there definitely, from that perspective, wasn't a room for improvement. And Daniel Whelan, with the power he packs, he's shown that, in that capacity, he very much can be an upgrade. Rich Bisaccia also said that, in terms of Whelan's holding, he has improved in that capacity as the preseason has gone on. So Packers they're taking a swing, and they're hoping that they can find, their long-term answer at punter in Daniel Whelan. And just like they're doing at several other positions, they're going to be willing to weather any of the ups and downs that come with relying on a young player, specifically as a holder. They're going to have a rookie kicker. They're going to have a rookie holder on those field goal and extra point operations. The Packers' long-standing tradition of undrafted rookies making their initial roster continued. It's now been 19 years in a row, with Wilson, of course, making it, along with Malik Heath and Brenton Cox. Cox led the team in pressures this preseason with 7. Plays a premium position, a high upside player, a productive player from the SEC at two well-known schools, Florida and Georgia. All of that is a recipe for a player who is going to be successful in the NFL. So if there was someone that they were going to cut and you'd be worried about another team claiming him, it would definitely be Brenton Cox. Again, high upside player, premier position, had a productive preseason, and all reasons why he is on this team right now. Malik Heath, he's been making plays since he arrived in Green Bay. This wasn't a 2-3 week roster push here in training camp for Malik Heath. He's literally been doing this since rookie minicamp, since OTAs back in May. He doesn't have the Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, sub 4.4 speed, but he knows how to create separation. He's really, really good at making contested catches. and the ball just finds him. And on top of that, as we've seen, a very, very willing and capable blocker. So as we know, that's a very important aspect of playing wide receiver in this Green Bay Packers offense. One other, I'll call it mild surprise that I'd say, is that the Packers at the cornerback position did not keep either Corey Ballentine or Innis Gaines. Obviously, a big reason I thought that either of them could be on the roster were for their special teams contributions. Both were core special teams players during the second half of last season. Both saw their fair share of snaps with the starting special teams units this summer when healthy. And we all know there's been a greater emphasis on that unit since Rich Bisaccia arrived in Green Bay last offseason. So for that reason alone, I very much thought that either of those players could be kept on the roster. Both also spent most of their time when healthy playing with the second unit, Ballentine on the boundary, Innis Gaines in the slot, and I've talked about Gaines on here before too. Also someone that if you're ever in a pinch could take some safety snaps. So was mildly surprised that the Packers did not keep either one of those players. At tight end, the Packers have only two true tight ends on the roster, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Josiah DeGuara can play in that capacity, of course, but it's technically a fullback, and ideally I imagine that's where the Packers would prefer to have him taking snaps. Brian Gutekunst said a few weeks ago, or last time he met with the media, that they're going to keep a close eye on the waiver wire system. So the way that works, all the NFL teams just made their initial cuts. If a player has less than 4 years of accrued NFL experience, they have to clear waivers. The waiver wire right now is determined by 2022 records, so the Green Bay Packers are 15th in the waiver wire order, meaning if they put in a claim on a player who's been released and another team ahead of them on the waiver wire priority, so anyone 1 through 14, because again they're in the 15th slot, puts in a claim on that same player, that goes to the team with the lowest waiver claim, or highest I should say, in terms of 1, 2, and 3 and so on. If a player has more than 4 years of accrued NFL experience, they do not go through the waiver wire system. They automatically become free agents and can sign with whatever team they please. So the Packers are going to be watching that market closely to see if there's any candidates, options that they could bring on at the tight end position. And really what they're looking for is a blocker, a traditional Y tight end who can help fill that Tyler Davis role and handle those primary blocking responsibilities. Now, with that said, I do think that the Packers are comfortable if they go into the preseason, or into the regular season, with Musgrave, Kraft, and DeGuara as their guys at the position. I think they're comfortable with that. Matt LaFleur has said that. Reasons being the depth that they have at the wide receiver position, also their ability and willingness to use a 6 offensive lineman. I think it was the 2021 season, there was a game or two that Mercedes Lewis missed, and we saw the Packers use a 6 offensive lineman, I think it was Rick Wagner at the time, out on the field, lined up as a tight end, but he was out there to block, just like Mercedes Lewis was. So we've seen under LaFleur the willingness for this Packers offense to do that. Could be a way to get Yosh Nijman or Rasheed Walker some playing time as well, carve out a role for them. So I think this is going to be a very fluid situation. I don't think the Packers are sitting there right now saying we have to go find a tight end. I think if the right one comes along, they'll absolutely make a move. But remember, if they bring someone in, the roster's at 53 right now, someone has to get released. So there is a corresponding move that's going to be a result of that. But like I said, this is going to be fluid. They don't feel that it's an absolute must. They'll just respond based on how the waiver wire turns out and who's available in that regard. Next up, Jonathan Ford. From a skill set standpoint, it's a bit redundant in comparison to TJ Slaton. They're both guys that you stick at the nose tackle, eat up space in the middle. Obviously, Slayton's the better player, but in terms of what you would ask them to do, in terms of where their skill sets lies, again, there's a bit of redundance there. However, generating consistent pressure in the run game, or push in the run game, I should say, is a must for this unit. And Jonathan Ford is someone who has been able to do that regularly this summer. Matt LaFleur, I've mentioned this on here before, talked about how he upped his game. And that wasn't a specific question about Jonathan Ford. Is Matt LaFleur answering one question and then went on a tangent and ended up talking about Jonathan Ford. So his play, he was really able to stand out in that regard. And as Brian Gutekunst said, they have a ton of pass rushers on that defensive front. But what Ford can provide is that an additional presence against the run, which, as you've heard me talk about before, is where success for this defense starts. They have to be better against the run, puts the offense in predictable passing situations, lets this defense do what they do best, go get the quarterback, allows their playmakers in the secondary to be playmakers, to play aggressively. So I think that there definitely is a role that Ford can have carved out for him this season in that run stuffing capacity, which again comes with his question marks. And you look at Devontae Wyatt, Kobe Wood, and Carl Brooks. Not to say that they can't be helpful against the run. They're going to have to be this season. But those are three guys where their bread and butter right now is just going and getting after the quarterback. So Ford can provide that change of pace with help in the run game. The Packers did end up rostering Royce Newman. He definitely had his share of rough moments this summer. I think I said on yesterday's video, it's hard to believe at times that he was, as a rookie, someone who played 1,000+ snaps on a 13-win football team, but he absolutely did. Unfortunately, instead of taking that step forward in year two, he feels like he just keeps coming backwards each year. Now, with that said, while I didn't have him on my final 53-man roster prediction, he checks the boxes in terms of what the Packers want in the offensive lineman. He's experienced and he's versatile. He can play either of the guard positions. They have depth at tackle, fortunately, but he's someone that if you were ever in a pinch in a game and you need someone to come in the second half to take some tackle snaps just to get you through the third and fourth quarter, like he could do that for you. And also in terms of interior offensive line depth, like the Packers don't have a ton. Their depth is the tackle position. Outside of the starting five, it's Royce Newman and Sean Rhyan. Those are the only interior guys on the roster, who aren't included in the starting five. So if an injury occurs, Newman is there to provide some extra depth as well. So again, he's definitely had his rough moments, but when we take a step back, look at what the Packers covet at the offensive line position, the makeup of that unit, again, specifically along the interior, you can see why they made the decision that they did to keep him on the roster. And again, when Luke Tenuta eventually returns, assuming that might happen at some point, a roster decision does have to be made, and who knows, at that time maybe it's Royce Newman. Grant DuBose, Packers 7th-round pick. He was one of 2 7th-round picks, him and Lou Nichols, or 2 draft picks in general, I should say, that did not make the Packers' final roster. He just had a really tough go of it in terms of having such a small window to try to make an impact coming off of an injury. He missed all of rookie minicamp. He missed all of OTAs, all of minicamp, missed the first half of training camp. Coming in and trying to make a significant impact in a 2 or 3 week window that he had, let alone as a rookie. Not only is he navigating the learning curve that comes from going from college to the NFL, but just the change in playbook, the change in speed that comes from that as well. I mean, that was really asking a lot of him. Matt LaFleur even said prior to his return that he's going to have a lot of catching up to do. It's one thing, you can be the best, have your nose in the playbook, watch all the film you want. But as Matt LaFleur said, there's no replacement for being out on the practice field, getting those reps, and implementing and doing what you're talking about. And DuBose really missed a ton of that due to his back injury that kept him sidelined for so long. I have to imagine that he's absolutely going to be a practice squad player that the Packers try to bring back. Obviously, they drafted him. They think highly of him. We saw him make some nice plays in practice. He's a willing and capable blocker, willing to do that dirty work that the Packers asked for from their wide receivers. I still think back to around the draft, and Jason Vrabel, the wide receivers coach, talked about when watching DuBose at Charlotte, got a little bit of Allen Lazard vibes from him, again, because of that willingness to block and do those extra things along with being a pass catcher. So it was just, unfortunately, due to injury, a tough situation for DuBose. The emergence of Malik Heath obviously played a factor in this as well, but again, have to imagine they want him back on the practice squad. At edge rusher, Justin Hollins, as I've mentioned on here before, he was a prime veteran cut candidate. A veteran player on a team that's looking to go younger, playing on an inexpensive 1-year deal that's easy to get out of at a position of depth. Like, that checks all the boxes in terms of if you're going to move on from a veteran, those are going to be the reasons why. However, I also added that based on how he's played, based on how he's being utilized, I just could not envision the Packers moving on from Hollins. He spent a lot of times in Rashawn Gary's absence, playing with the starters. In addition to that, effective as a pass rusher, held up well against the run. And as we look ahead to week 1, Rashawn Gary, if he's available, very well could be on a snap count. In terms of, who's most game ready right now to go out there and see significant snaps, like Justin Hollins is ahead of Lucas Van Ness. Obviously, Lucas Van Ness comes with way more upside, way more potential. It's not even close, but, he's still raw. And of course, Van Ness is going to have a role that's carved out for him. He's going to be put in situations where he can just go and get the quarterback, go from point A, go to point B, use your speed, use your power. But in terms of someone who's more seasoned and more just game ready to take on a variety of roles, that's Justin Hollins. So Hollins has a role on this team in that edge rusher position, even though, again, it's a very, very deep and talented unit that they've been able to construct, and it led to the Green Bay Packers keeping 6 players at this premier position. 2 more observations. Tariq Carpenter. He took a lot of lumps at linebacker this summer, making that change from safety to the linebacker position. And in the last 2 preseason games and those practices that were in between those, as I said, it looked like Jimmy Phillips, the undrafted rookie from SMU, was ahead of Carpenter from a defensive standpoint. However, he's still a core special teams contributor, and I think ultimately that played a key factor in the Packers keeping him around, along with he's only in his 2nd season. He's still on a rookie deal in terms of, again, what are the Packers trying to do? Find out who their core guys can be. A young player on an inexpensive contract who can at least contribute on special teams. That's going to be more appealing than Tavarius Moore, again, a veteran on a 1-year deal who can contribute on special teams as well. But if you're comparing those 2 apples to apples, the advantage for most football teams is going to be with Carpenter, again, because of age, because of upside, because of contract and all of those factors. So I really did think that Carpenter could have been one of those surprise cuts for the reasons mentioned. It was really, really tough sledding at the linebacker position. I think the opportunity to be on a practice squad would give him that added opportunity to get more comfortable with that position. But ultimately, he's not on this team right now to be a contributor on defense. He's here to help on special teams. And last season, he absolutely proved that he can be an asset in that phase of the game. Lastly, we all know Brian Gutekunst loves keeping his draft picks. The Packers had a very big draft class this year, 13 selections, and 11 of them made the roster, 3 undrafted rookies on top of that, and also all 11 of the Packers' 2022 draft picks made the team as well. I saw on Twitter from Dari Carragher of Packer Report that this is the youngest team by age. He did the math. The Packers' average age right now is 24.9 years old, and that's the youngest team in the last 6 seasons in the NFL. So the youth movement is here for the Packers. Obviously, they want to go out and win games this season, but 2 of their other big goals, things they have to find out is 1, can Jordan Love be our guy moving forward? And 2, who is our core? Who are the guys that we can lean on and we can build around in 2024 and beyond? So there you have it, my friends. Those are my quickish takeaways, I should say, from the Packers' final 53-man roster, their initial 53-man roster. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. Hit like on the video. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. And you can find all my work over at Packers Wire. So until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack Go.